I'm Mark Golub, and in the news, the ongoing controversy surrounding Israel's banning Representative Ilhan Omar and Representative Rashida Tlaib from entering the country. Many American Jews have been critical of Israel for this move, arguing that Israel is a democratic country that tolerates dissent and differing opinions, and that by denying Omar and Tlaib entry, it's against Israeli principles and makes Israel look petty, even weak, as if it were unable to withstand criticism. People also argue that Israel is making a big mistake by barring sitting members of the United States Congress, something Israel has never done before. And Democrats came to Omar and Tlaib's defense, with Nancy Pelosi publicly saying she was, quote, deeply disappointed. And House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, a real supporter of Israel, calling the Israeli ban outrageous. Senator Bernie Sanders and Senator Elizabeth Warren, each running for the Democratic Party's nomination for president, each condemned Israel for the ban. Warren calling it shameful, and said it worked against the Israeli claim that it is a staunch ally of the United States. Kamala Harris, also running for her party's nomination, called the Israeli ban an affront to the United States. And former Vice President Joe Biden, the leading candidate for his party's nomination, criticized Israel by saying, no democracy should deny entry to visitors based on the content of their ideas, even ideas they strongly object to. And no leader of the free world should encourage them to do so. The latter comment, of course, was meant as a criticism of President Trump, who tweeted that Israel would be making a mistake and showing weakness if it permitted Omar and Tlaib to enter the country with the express purpose of bashing Israel and of promoting BDS. And I could go on and on, citing those who've no problem at all criticizing Israel for barring Omar and Tlaib. Even Jewish organizations, which I admire and respect and promote here on JBS, like AIPAC and the American Jewish Committee, as pro-Israel as you can get. They were moved to criticize Israel, with the AJCs taking the position that even if Israel had a just reason for banning Omar and Tlaib, the fallout in terms of American criticism would ultimately work to Israel's detriment. Well, those of you who received JBS's Sunday email know that I wrote my own op-ed piece on this issue. My position was, it's very complicated. It's a tricky issue. And that Israel will be damned no matter what it does. And that Americans and American Jews should respect Israel's decision either way. But what upset me last week, and what upsets me all the more after all the piling on against Israel that went on this past weekend, is a complete lack of understanding for why Israel imposed the ban, and for all the stories about how the ban came to be. Israel has a law. It's a law everyone knows or should know. The law is, anyone is welcome to visit Israel with one exception. You can't be working for BDS. You can't be working to destroy the state of Israel. This has nothing to do with being critical of Israel. Israel tolerates criticism more than any Western democracy on the face of the earth, including our United States. But Israel draws a line where every democracy draws the line. Enemies who wish to destroy the state are not welcome. And those who argue, like Vice President Biden, that no democracy should deny entry to visitors based on the content of their ideas, is either unaware of American history or is deliberately distorting American history to pander to those who support Omar and Tlaib in their ugly attempt to destroy Israel. America has repeatedly denied entry to people whom they believe are dangerous or who are likely to incite violence, including Israelis. In 2009, the Obama administration banned an Israeli named Michael Ben-Ari, who was running for a Knesset seat in the Israeli parliament because he'd once been an advocate of Meir Kahana's Kach party, which is deemed to be racist and a terrorist party. And are any of you watching JBS right now old enough to remember when the United States barred entry to Yasser Arafat in 1988? Arafat, who was coming to New York to address the United Nations. Arafat was denied entry because he was known to condone and support acts of terrorism. It's true that Israel has never banned a United States congressman from visiting Israel on a fact-finding mission. Absolutely true. But no sitting congressman or woman has ever before advocated for BDS, the single most immoral movement on the planet Earth today, which calls for nothing less than the eradication of a nation-state of the United Nations, the State of Israel. Tlaib and Omar were not on a fact-finding mission to Israel. In fact, they called their trip a trip to Palestine, not Israel. And they refused to meet with any Israeli representative, not of the Netanyahu government, not of the opposition, no one. And they were sponsored by a group called Miftah, a virulently anti-Israel group that supports and condones and encourages terrorism against Israel. And what upsets me the most is that major figures on the American scene don't see Israel's perspective, cannot say anything conciliatory about Israel's untenable position, does not make clear in any plain language how Omar and Tlaib have crossed a line which Americans, not Jewish Americans, all Americans, should find reprehensible. United States members of Congress should not be traveling to Palestine. They should not be fomenting violence and hatred against the State of Israel. And Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer and Joe Biden and every member of the House and Senate should be saying so. Why aren't they? Why aren't they? And why should leaders of Jewish organizations be afraid of the fallout from Israel's doing what America itself has done time and time again? And does it all come back to Donald Trump? Is it because Donald Trump tweeted that Israel should not let Omar and Tlaib in? And then seemingly his pal, Prime Minister Netanyahu, buckled under American presidential pressure and changed its stance on permitting Omar and Tlaib into the country. Is that what happened? Israel's ambassador to the United States, Ron Dermer, told the President's Conference Israel's decision had nothing to do with Trump's tweet. Dermer says Israel only changed its mind and imposed a ban when they saw Omar and Tlaib's itinerary, that they called their visit a trip to Palestine and refused to meet any Israeli. That's hardly a congressional fact-finding mission, which a large number of members of Congress had done just days earlier. At the same time, Many Jews, including many Israelis, don't believe Dermer. They believe it's all about Netanyahu pandering to Trump. By the way, Israel Katz, Israel's foreign minister, Israel Katz, told Israeli television that Dermer was the cause of the controversy because he sanctioned Omar and Tlaib's visit without consulting Prime Minister Netanyahu. And in fact, Israel did subsequently grant Tlaib the right to visit her 90-year-old grandmother on the West Ridge on the condition that Tlaib did not engage in any BDS incitement. And at one point, Tlaib actually agreed to that offer, with the conditions Israel laid out. She agreed she would not engage in anti-Israel rhetoric. Tlaib agreed. But when the issue became a public cause celeb, Tlaib retracted her promise to refrain from anti-Israel actions during her visit and instead blamed Israel for humiliating her by restricting her right to free speech. And so she gave up her request to visit her 90-year-old grandmother. So what's really going on here? Was this really all about a Donald Trump tweet? Did Israel betray its own democratic principles? Does Israel merit harsh criticism from members of Congress? And will there be a backlash against Israel within the American community, within the American Jewish community, because of Israel's ban of Omar and Tlaib? For some insight, we turn now to our JBS phones to speak to an Israeli with a unique perspective of the Israeli political scene. He's the former Israeli ambassador to Washington. He's a former deputy foreign minister. It's a pleasure to always have with us Danny Ayalon. Danny, thank you so much for joining us once again on JBS.
My pleasure, always, Mark.
So, Danny, you heard my open. I want you to tell us what you understand the backstory here to be. Why did the Netanyahu government change its mind and ban Representatives Omar and Tlaib from entering Israel?
Well, first off, Mark, I really listened very attentively to your opening, and I could not agree more with everything that you said. And I want to thank you for your perception, for your real understanding and analyzing a complex situation and make it simple for your viewers. And so I will start with that.
Thank you.
Now, as to the let's say, some call it here the zigzagging of the Israeli government's decision. Well, first of all, a government has the right to change any decision based on changing circumstances. And indeed, when the Ambassador Dermer, said that, Israel would, out of respect to Congress, welcome here these two congresswomen, this was really the idea. We have a law, and as you mentioned, against entry of Israel to supporters of BDS. BDS is actually a euphemism for the destruction of the state of Israel. We know what the battle cry of BDS is. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. No room for a Jewish state in the land of Israel. In any way, there is in the law, there is also a sanction which calls for actually a waiver. So the prime minister or the foreign minister have the right to waive the law. That means to admit even people that they think are BDS supporters, if it is of Israeli interest, for reasons of national interest or security interest, and this is fine. So first of all, the itinerary of the two representatives certainly was a factor. But whether, and I cannot tell you whether the Trump's request was a factor or not, but I can tell you that as a principle, every leader, every prime minister of Israel must take into a consideration request of the President of the United States, of the leader of our best friend and ally, for two reasons. First of all, we are friends. Secondly, because we have made many requests of American presidents through the years, and mostly they have heeded to these requests. And even when we talk about this very specific entry into a country, and you know, entry into a country is like entry into a private home. You know, a country is the home of its people. Israel is the home of the Jewish people. Everyone, whether it's in the private life, whether it's a national life, has the right to admit anyone they want to, or bar from getting into their home anyone that they don't want to. There is also I would say, a universal conduct by countries. Countries, and you know, any democracy would not allow ex-convicts to come in. They would not allow fugitives to come in. They would not allow terrorists to come in. And also, they would not allow leaders of countries who are enemies. For instance, and rightly so, Iranian politicians cannot come to the United States based only on their ideology and, of course, their conduct against the United States. So there is no difference in from a moral point of view.
Okay.
From a, I would say, from a very, very, any sense to criticize Israel. And you mentioned, rightly so, Mark, that when Michael Ben-Ari was denied entry to the United States, there was no ruckus, there was no media attention.
That is correct.
There is a big double standard when it comes to Israel here.
Danny, no one's arguing that Israel doesn't have the right to do it. What they're arguing is Israel made a mistake for a whole host of reasons. Number one, it looks like they are just, again, this buddy-buddy relationship that Donald Trump and Netanyahu have, and how it's portrayed throughout American media. I imagine it's portrayed the same way in Israel, that it seemed that Netanyahu was doing Donald Trump's bidding. There's also an argument that these are sitting members of the United States Congress. You were an ambassador for Israel to Washington. You knew them all. There is a protocol. And the question I really wanted you to speak to is, from your perspective, and then I also want to hear how you feel Israel, you know, the people all around you feel, not simply Danny Ayalon, but what's your take of how the Israeli people have responded to this issue. But the question is, did Israel do something which it has every right to do, but by denying sitting members of Congress entry into Israel, they did something that made Israel look bad, weak, and as if they can't tolerate criticism? Was it as much of a right as Israel has? Was it in some way counterproductive from your perspective?
Well, that's an excellent question, Mark. And I guess the question here, even if it was right to deny entry, was it smart?
Yes.
I mean,
that's
we
exactly.
may be just, but were we smart? This is the question here.
Yes.
And of course, the answer to that would be very nuanced. You know, Israel was from the get-go in a lose-lose situation.
Absolutely.
It very much reminds me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it reminds me of the same PR fiasco we had with the Marmara, the Turkish ship, who tried to break its way into Gaza. So we had this dilemma. Are we stopping them? And of course, this is a bad thing. Or are we letting them in? Which is even worse because
Yes.
they, bring in terror elements and others. So it is a big dilemma. And at the end of the day, you have to really judge the what is the cost and benefit to this. And really, this is the call of leadership. And sometimes they would take or would have to take a position where they know is the lesser of two evils.
Yes.
Where Israel would suffer less. So it is true that in the short run we may have a bad rap, bad PR. Unfortunately, although I would just add something here in parentheses, those who criticize Israel, most of those who criticize Israel, are those who are detractors of the state anyway. Mm-hmm. Of course, we take very seriously when these great organizations like AIPAC and AJC criticize us, and we know that this comes from a very, very honest place. But all the others, it's just a matter of taking a position before, just on the basis of who we are, not of what we do. And I believe that in the long run, this will be forgotten. And I know that there is a big concern here, and certainly in the Jewish community in the United States, and rightly so, about relationship of Israel with the Democrats. We really came into an era which is, these are just uncharted waters. We have never been in a situation that Israel was dragged into the domestic politics of the United States. Mm-hmm. And the bipartisan support has always been a real great foundation of our alliance, of our friendship, which I would say it's a natural one on all, for all the good reasons, the values and interests and everything that comes with it, with all the interests. And I've always said, Mark, that no matter who occupies the White House or the Prime Minister's office in Jerusalem, the relationship is much bigger than any certain individual or even a party, mm-hmm. and certainly a partisan policies. Mm-hmm. And this has been the case, throughout until 2009. And we do see a shift in the Democratic Party, not from today, but from 2009. And I'm afraid to say, I'm afraid that the shift started with the administration of President Obama, who, as you mentioned, denied entry of an Israeli member of Knesset. Mm-hmm. Today, I know that, again, from my humble observation here, I see the Democrats in a real, I would say, very, very crucial juncture from their perspective. Where do they go from here? There is a battle there inside the party, on the soul of the party, on the ideology and policies of the party, and for its vision for the future. And unfortunately, we do have a fringe element, and thankfully it's a very small one, but it's a very, I would say, very loud, vociferous, as represented by the two congresswomen, Omar and Tlaib. They certainly are not representing by and large, the Democrats. But and I do hope that with time they will take the right direction with the right decisions, and basically would call out those members of Congress who are anti-Semitic, who are anti-Zionist, who are racist, and really seeking the destruction of the state of Israel. We have to call them out, and this has not been the case yet. But I have great faith in America, in the Jewish community in America and also in the Democratic Party, that they will find the right way.
That is beautifully said. It's also courageous of you. I hope our audience understands that, I didn't know exactly what you would feel free to say on American television, but boy, I thought you said it exactly right. I only have a minute or so left. I do want you to tell us, in the Israeli street, what's the mood of the Israeli people on this issue? Are they angry at Netanyahu for this? Do they think Israel made the right decision? You only have about 60 seconds, but what is the sentiment on the street?
Okay. Well, Mark, you know the backdrop. The backdrop is that we are now in a very intensive election campaign. We have our elections in less than a month from now. So everyone takes the position from where they are. The British say, where you sit is where you stand. So, of course, those who are opposed to Netanyahu criticize him. Those who favor Netanyahu justify what he did. But I would say, by and large, I think more people understand and support the Netanyahu decision than those that object.
Very interesting. I think one of the most important things you've said is, again, what you and I would both like to see. We know that there are people going to be critical of Israel. And Israel was in, as you said, no matter what it did, it was going to lose. I said it was a no-win situation for Israel. All I wanted from both the Jewish community, and I really wanted it from our Congress people on both sides of the aisle, to say this is a complicated issue. And Israel is in a very difficult position, and at least we should understand all the forces here, and this is not an opportunity to bash Israel, and there should be no member of Congress, Danny, there should be no member of Congress supporting BDS from the river to the sea. There will be no Israel. And I think, I hope people heard you say that, and I'm very grateful for your having the courage to say it on American television.
Well, thank you, Mark. Thank you for allowing me to have this great platform of yours, and I really appreciate your messages and your really dedication and hard work for our people, for the alliance between Israel and the United States, and also for morality, for the truth, which also has to be brought out. The debate that Israel has just shows how democratic we are, how pluralistic we are.
Absolutely. My friend, it is always...
And it.
It is always wonderful to speak to you. We'll speak again as we get closer to the election. And, the summer's almost over. We will talk and see each other many times. Danny, thank you very much for always being with me on JBS.
My pleasure. Thank you, Mark.
Be well. Danny Ayalon, Israel's former ambassador to Washington and former deputy foreign minister. My thanks to our director, Sloan Copeland, associate director, Dara Golub, transmission manager, John McDevitt, and to the producer of this edition of In the News, Tisha Bader. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.